Hi guys, Gem here. This video is my detailed walkthrough for my current orbiter build. You may have seen snippets and edits of its progress on my other social media, but in this video it will be much more thorough, and I'll be taking my time to explain my process as well as some of the things I used and where I got them. This isn't going to be a tutorial video. However, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to ask down in the comments below. As always, it is a pleasure to make these videos for you and do content and answer your questions, and also inspire other people to delve into IKEA frame. Without further ado, let's get started. The first structure I'm going to start with is this sort of skirting that you see that wraps from this side all the way to that side. This structure helped me to map out the rest of the room. First thing is arcade ticket machines. I'm not sure of a specific number, but I recommend getting 20 to 30 of them per room. I started from the center and I worked my way out using grid snapping. So scale your arcade ticket machine all the way up. Use your grid snapping at point 1 to kind of determine where the middle is. The ship is very symmetrical, so you can use all of the details, all of these like bumps and lines and curves as sort of markers to help you determine if you're in the center, especially if the object itself that you're using is symmetrical. And you can, from there, build around, and then once you get to the corner, you can turn it 45 degrees and continue building off. I did go ahead and add surfaces, so you can add really whatever you want for a surface. You can add tables, anything flat. In this case, I used the 1999 planters flipped upside down because it has a smooth granite-like surface. And I used that pretty much for this side. And then the rest of the way, I used dining tables. I sunk them down in using constrained movement just to kind of make sure that they're flush with the other surfaces. I used Entrati wall sconces to trim and fill in any gaps. Angling it 45 degrees inward just allows us to keep that tucked away. For this dark wood detailing you see here, this is actually the 1999 foosball table. I actually placed this freehand. I did not use grid snapping for it, but I did use constrained movement to get it inside, obviously because there's collision between this table and the arcade ticket machine. And you can use your constrained movement to move the object back. Play around with the arrows if it's giving you some issues. In my case, I'd needed to raise it up a little bit. And then you can just back it in however you need to. I back it in just enough so that I can't see the rods. And these lights that you see here, this is the Zarman tube light. I did clip it further in so that I could hide the pegs that stick out on either side. I used the Laverian murals here to catch the light from the Zarman tube. Now we're going to talk about the incline. Everything on this front here is angled at 45 degrees. We're going to start from the outside in. I used these Zarman storage crate lids, the large ones that you can get from Hombask. I used a Laverian mural to border it off, and I used like a dining table to just sort of trim that edge off as well to add a variation in texture, but also to hide the gap. These are the Zarman wall lockers. I actually overlapped 2 of them. And once again, this is trimmed with Entrati wall sconces, just going up to this point. And I did also use Entrati wall sconces to just give a little bit of detail. By the way, the designs on the Laverian murals are a little bit spaced out from the actual mural. And this is why we're able to see the design still show up through the Zarman storage crate lid. This is a dining table scaled all the way. I pulled it up just enough to hide the 1999 computer because it is very unsightly. I hate it. So going back, this part is pretty simple. Arcade ticket machines, starting from this end all the way until you touch the wall. I chose not to decorate this area because I still wanted to preserve the defining elements that make this a ship. Now we're going to talk the plants, the stairs, and these sort of window sections here. The plants are just the 1999 planter, the small indoor one. All you need to do is use constrained movement with your grid snap off, local transform on to sink the planter in. Place whatever plant you want. In this case, this is the lunar pitcher that you get from Nightcap. This area, it was also skirted with arcade ticket machines. Now, for those of you who have built in this area before, especially on this ramp, you have probably noticed that there is a really bad red zone up to about this point. What I'm going to recommend is if you're going to build steps like this, right when the ramp here ends, you will run into that red zone more than likely. The best thing you want to do, especially if you want to place items here that are not shallow, that do go a little bit deep, is to start from up here and constrained move it all the way back. Sink it down up here, then move it back and make your adjustments as needed. If you want to trim your stairs with that red detailing, the keyboards that you get from Flare and Halvania, in the same room where Velimir and Minerva are, you can get these. You do have to do Solstice Square, which is the defense mission, to get the beating heartstrings to afford all of the band equipment. And I've basically used Entrati wall sconces I started with grid snap, and then if I needed to adjust something, I then use constrained movement. But you can see how this is snapping into place with 0.1. I wanted to use that as a guideline to just make sure that it's as centered and as neat as possible. So that is the steps. So now I'm going to go ahead and explain these two glass cubbies on either side. We're going to go first on the inside, just so you can see how simple it is. I wanted it to serve its functionality while still looking nice on the outside, right? So it's not really like you could see much in there anyway. So we'll just start here. I added a Zariman wall panel. The Zariman wall panel, pretty much the average size of the panel, or just enough to cover the floor, or cover the section that's inside here. And it does have a little bit of excess, or there's a gap here, but that part doesn't matter. Like I said, this is not front and center, and it's going to be mostly hidden by the beacons and the glass panels, so I'm not worried about that. Okay, aside from that, all I did was I took a large Zariman storage crate lid. I have it protruding just enough that it hides everything, but it still shows the gold detailing, and this is actually a natural accent of the ship. So I didn't have to use an Entrati wall sconce to make this trim. This is part of the ship, and I can still save capacity whilst having that gold detailing. Lastly, I added two more Zariman storage crate lids, one up top, as well as one back here to hide the gap. And of course, I repeated this on the other side, just rotating them the other way so that the prongs aren't like protruding like in the middle. So that is it for the inside of the cubbies. Now we're going to talk the actual panels. These sort of gold and glass pillars are a combination of things. So the Deveri Repass table, these tables are obtained from Acrithis when you go into your Dormizone. Basically, you're just taking a Deveri Repass table, scaled it whatever size you had it, placing one this way, rotating it 90 degrees, placing one this way, having those corners meet. You may need to use your constrained placement to line the corners up neatly. And another thing you want to be wary of is that the tables have a support at the bottom that can protrude through your floor. So if that's something you don't want visible, make sure that you have positioned it so that it's hidden underneath. You can then cover it up with posters. In this case, I used 4 display landscapes each for like each pillar. So 2 on either side. So you want to scale it up to the highest size, or to the largest size or whatever fits your pillar or your panel. You want to choose this image here. This is like a sort of drawing of human versions of Rhino and Ember. So it doesn't have a specific name, it's just fan art, but it'll be somewhere. It is just a fan art that comes with the posters already. So you should already be able to access this even if you haven't scanned all of your fragments. Every single poster on these pillars uses these settings. And when you place these posters down initially, they are not going to be flush. So get it as close as you can with freehand or grid snap, it doesn't matter. And then we're going to use constrained placement to back it up and get it as close as we can to the panel. Now we're going to talk about the note beacon. Now the code that I'm using is mod set filled notch. All caps, underscore, make sure you have a dark color for your light because you don't want it to have any beam showing, right? You don't want to see this unless that's really what you want to go for, but you want to choose a dark color and you want to lower the intensity so that you can't see a beam shining. The length determines how far that glass is going to go. It determines how close or far your projection is from the beacon itself. And these are my details. Now, as for this light fixture here, there are 3 layers to it. You have the Zarman flush mount light, then you have the Ansiphis decoration from Grandma, and then you have this Mod Luxem ornament from Baro Katir. Finally, just one last touch to add a little something to it. This decoration here is called a Grimoire altar. You can get it in the market for plat. I just did this to add a little bit of detail to the front of the ship. That is navigation. Okay, so this is actually day 2 of me recording, and the second phase is going into the arsenal room. I'm actually going to include a couple of references as picture overlays here at some point so that you can see what I used for inspiration. These right here, these are the 1999 dining tables. Using that grid snap to kind of keep them lined up, I duplicated it along the end and I essentially just kind of created a little rectangle because this rectangular shape is going to help me define the room. This glossy dark surface that you see here was all posters. I then took the Igtrati wall sconces and trimmed it so that it has a nice gold edge to it. The wooden blocks that you see here, these wooden slats, these are actually sideboards, scaled down almost to the smallest size, not entirely. Once I got my sideboards and everything ready, honestly, you can just take this part and you can, I don't even remember really how I placed it. I think it's red zoning now because there's so much stuff in the way, but hey guys, it's Editing Gem here, and the reason the Zarman wall panel is red zoning is because my companion is still inside of the incubator as I was doing this clip. So just reminded me to say that if you are placing your paneling down, especially on this side of the ship, make sure that your free moving companion is like outside of the incubator roaming around so that it doesn't get in the way as you're trying to build. I don't remember what's creating the red zone, but at the time when I was just on my basics and it was only a little bit out that I had placed, it was easy to kind of place these wall panels down at the time. Remember to flip it upside down if you want the flat side up. And then if you have the plat to invest, you can use a set of Laverian murals to trim the edge. If you really want to know how much I used on each side, it looks like about 7 of them. I did use the 1999 planters to give a little bit of variation. Any gaps I had open here were filled with posters. So that's landscape display, landscape display. Okay, this actually uses 3 And this is using 2 because it is more narrow. Remember, posters have no collision, meaning you can walk through them. So you can use posters to your advantage to still hide spaces while also being able to access those spaces. In terms of trim, the thin trim, remember the thin trim that has a little bit more texture is the Entrati wall sconce. I used the same orientation or the same positioning, 0.1, to duplicate Entrati wall sconces all across, so I have a nice division between the light, which I will get into, and the rest of the structures below the trim. Now for this inner corner, I did add a Zariman hallway divider. I backed it into the corner just enough so that there's like a small concrete block, and using this as a ruler, I just inched it out just enough until it was just before the trim. I did that on that side as well. The arsenal was rather easy for me. This is the Zariman plinth. This is the one that costs 4,000 platinum. Because there's actually a lot of room behind the arsenal, you can get away with pushing this back pretty far before you even hit a red zone. Just free movement, no grid snap. And I use constrained movement, local transform, grid snap off to push this panel back just enough. And you may need to kind of move it around a little bit just to get it inside. Now I wanted to trim it, so I'm using those keyboards again that you get from Temple, the same ones that I used in the stairs in the front of the ship. I used 2 of them. Turned them upside down and I clipped them into the back, and also lowered it a little bit so that it was underneath this gold Entrati wall sconce, which is tilted, by the way, so it's not straight, it's tilted a little bit. Same for the other one, this one's tilted downward. And keyboards were used, but this time I flipped them upside down, and I used constrained movement to push them up like that and push them back. The Zariman storage crate lids, the large ones, were used to frame the section of the arsenal. I'm using 1999 wooden planters, the large ones, with grid snapping to create a border around the arsenal. I will also let you know that I did build this from the outside in, so I actually started with these planters and then I went in and added these extra details. Once again, for this section, trim, just like I did on this side, and it's easy to kind of, you can even eyeball it and just make sure that it's lined up. Here in this case, 0.1 is the perfect elevation. For the bar, I used the 1999 wooden planters, the large ones. I'm gonna include a reference somewhere so you can see it. In this reference, I was inspired by that backlit bar shelf. For the shelves, I'm using the DeViri repass table. So the same gold paneling that you saw out in my navigation that I put the posters over, it has a nice thin gold edge. It's completely flat for the most part. These planters are thick enough to hide the rest of the table. For the glowing yellow, this is actually a poster, and I've used several. That is 6 display landscape posters. Now, the image that I'm using here is the Smoke Finger Memory Fragment 2 of 5. You can only get this fragment if you have done all of the scans or all of the memory fragment scans in Fortuna. There is a scavenger hunt guide online if you want to follow it to get all of these scans. And then these are the numbers that you want to use for the display landscape. You want to have these posters grid snapped because when they're grid snapped, they're going to be on the same plane. The only thing you have to worry about is using constrained movement so that they're not glitching together so violently like it is here. As for these lights, this golden ring you see that's surrounding these lights, that is the 1999 floor lamp that you get from Bellemere, okay? It's this lamp. And I use grid snap to make sure that the lamps are lined up on the same plane. Obviously, you need to place your lamps first if you're going to be using the lamp base as housing for your globe light. So place your lamps, use constrained movement once you've gotten them lined up to push them up so that it's just the gold base sticking out. And then you can go back in with your Zarman globe light, use grid snap there. However much you want the light to stick out, you control that. And then you can make your tweaks. If it feels off, if it feels uneven, use your constrained movement to do those fine adjustments. You can eyeball it if you're comfortable with that. Now we're going to talk about these TVs. If you have not yet completed the Deadlock Protocol quest, you will not be able to access these tenants. Complete this quest, make sure you've racked up enough Granum crowns, turn in one of your Granum crowns or your coins into that Parvo statue. It's surrounded by a fountain. And then from there, it will reward you with one of these displays. I used grid snap. In this case, I just used 0.1. Now, these posters, they're taller than the tenant itself. So when I place these posters in, and I'm gonna go ahead and demonstrate to you, because they're taller, I needed to push them up a little bit. And then I needed to use constrained movement. I needed to back this poster into the frame. But also at the same time, I needed to make sure that the poster was high up enough that there was no excess coming out of the tenant. And then I overlaid it with a glyph display. I'm gonna rotate this on a point so that it's out of the way because sometimes you can't grab them. The art is called Corpus. You get this from doing Cephalon scans. These are the settings. And the glyph is just so it looks like there's something on TV. All right, so now a continuation with the bar. Basically, I built off of this pillar here using arcade ticket machines. Obviously, it doesn't look right on the other side. You need to kind of cover it up. So I took the extra set to conceal. Now from there, I did use sideboards and I sunk the sideboard into the counter using constrained placement. And then I used another set of sideboards to hide the sliding doors that are there. Posters were used for the LEDs that were here just to save up on cat because a beacon would have been more costly. So I used display poster. This is scaled to the max size. These are the settings. It's that same smoke finger memory fragment. I use the same mirroring technique. I also use the display posters to create a glossy surface. These two sort of dispenser looking things are the gilded alchemy stand that you get from Leon. I just grid snapped two of them side by side. For the bar stools, I'm using the Auroron decoration from Grandma. Bear in mind, there are Entrati Ottomans that were flipped upside down. I placed those first. Then I followed with the Auroron. Without the Entrati Ottoman, it just looks like it's stuck into the floor. It doesn't look like it has an ending to it. All right, we're going to talk about this nook here. This is the foundry. I used arcade ticket machines, and this is a Laverian mural. This is just to kind of create a nice division or a border. Entrati wall sconce all around. Display landscapes to create this Cora mural. Now, this will need a little bit of practicing to get right, but it's basically like putting a puzzle piece together. You want to use grid snapping so that you can get the positioning right so that you have the images lined up where they need to be. Then you can go in and use your constrained placement to separate the posters. It's a combination of both. It's messing with the sliders for each poster and using the constrained placement to move it left, right, up, down, just so that the posters align perfectly. For this cross symbol, it's the cloth arc planter that you get from Borrow. The same technique was applied with these arm and hallway dividers as it was with these back here. Now we're going to talk about this light fixture and the combination. You will need the indoor small planter from Bellemere. You'll need a square poster. You'll need a Zarman flush mount light. You'll need an Ansiphis decoration from Grandma, the Clathark planter from Borrowed Katir, and you will need the Mod Luxem ornament from Borrow. But that is the configuration, and this was applied to that lamp over there. The same technique was applied here as well. Now this actually leads me to explaining this light fixture. Before I do, I'm gonna go ahead and flip this so that it's out of the way. You're gonna need 4 wrap displays to create this cylinder that is your lamp. I scaled it all the way down to the smallest size. For the image, I'm using the Roots and Fruits fragment you get from completing your Noko bounties. These are the settings. I used a 0.1 grid snap increment to place 1 down, duplicate, flip 90 degrees, place, duplicate, flip 90 degrees, you get it, until you've made a full cylinder. Now, as for this yellow ring that's behind the Zariman light, this is the Tondo display, the circular one. For the image, I'm using Alberic's Notes. It's a fragment that you get from doing the Sanctum Anatomica missions, and these are the settings I have. And then to top it off, I used the Baruch Prime Mandala. I actually had this positioned at 0.1. As of the date of this video's upload, this Baruch Prime Mandala is still in Prime Resurgence for 1 Regal Aya. And the energy color is going to be the same color as your orbiter lights that you choose. So in this case, I chose black because I didn't want any other energy distracting from the actual light fixture. Okay, so for my shells on display, arcade ticket machines at the top, 1 at the bottom, Deviri repass table for the gold lining, 2 display posters for the shiny platform. For the mounts to hold the Shazans, I'm using the Deviri Calculum. You get this from Akrathis in your Dormazone. And for the light that's up here, I use the same technique that I use with the lights here above the bar. This is the Paracesis sheath. You get this from Cephalon Cimaris. It is 25k standing. It also has no collision, so you can walk right through it. That's how I'm able to so easily access my mods. As far as the Zariman statue plinths, you only need 3. So that's 1, 2, 3. And you can place these by hand. Okay, so I actually flipped these plinths on the opposite side so I can get some of those engravings to show, but it works on either side. But essentially, yes, you can flip your plinth upside down and you can place it like freehand, and you can actually line them up without even having to use grid snap. And you can even go in with constrained placement like you see me doing here to find any sweet spots so that you know how far you can go before it turns red. And I did this all across, and it's just 1, 2, 3. Expensive, but worth it, especially if you want a nice touch of gold across your orbiter. Now we're going to get to note beacons, specifically what's creating the soft yellow light that you see all around the room. Only 4 beacons were used in this room, 2 for the longer sides of the rectangle and 2 for the shorter sides. For the sake of being concise, I'm only going to explain the technique for 1 beacon, because the same settings are going to apply to each beacon, and grid snap is going to help you with getting your beacons lined up. Another thing to bear in mind is that the note beacons are an early stage placement, so placing these first, it's good to get that out of the way before you do anything else in terms of going downward, because the trim here, the Entrati wall sconces, that's going to sort of frame them off and, you know, keep the edges clean. That's one of the main reasons why I added trim all around, just a cutoff for the light to stop at. Bear in mind, you can access the note beacons through the glass. So even though I did push it beyond the glass, it's still something that you can reach. You may need to use constrained movement to push it out. So as you can see, it's colliding with the glass here. I did use constrained movement to push it up, but that is not a bad thing, because you can always reach through and grab things through glass. It's not that far away, so don't worry. Now edit your decoration contents. Choose a dark color for the light and intensity low. The length does have to be 0.2, especially if you're positioning it up here, because if it's any lower, it's going to be all the way down there. The code that I'm using is mod set empty notch, but it doesn't really matter if it's empty or filled notch, because we're really only focusing on one bar, not the one up here. This is the color combination I'm using. So that looks like Fire E4 and Agony E16. You can use any similar yellow or gray, and just remember that the color transition is meant to be a gradient, so the color combinations are going to look awkward. I would just recommend playing around with it, see what sticks, see what looks pretty for you. You don't have to do the yellow color if you don't want to. And aside from that, with the beacon facing down, this is the rotation setting. Once you confirm all of that and you're happy with, how the light looks, now once you've applied these settings, you can confirm, duplicate your beacon, and I personally would recommend to go in and kind of apply those settings one at a time so you can keep track of how it looks each time you place it down. So enter the beacon code first, the mod set empty notch, so that you can kind of see how the bars are looking on each side of the rectangle. Now I'm gonna go take a nap and come back and record the other two rooms. All right, so now that we've gone over the navigation and the main room, the arsenal room, I am ready to go ahead and take us to the personal quarters. And the last room will be the transference chamber. I'm going to start by saying that this room is an experience to decorate in. And I don't mean that in a positive way. I feel like it's really annoying in terms of the red zones that are in here. Doing an explanation might not be the easiest thing, but I will go ahead and explain what I'm using here. So I'm gonna let you guys see what it looks like under here so you can see how much I've built off of the floor. So the original floor, as you can see, this is how high up the flooring I set is versus the actual floor, which is the black carpet that you see below. I needed to use a Zariman statue plinth to essentially create a new floor. And the reason for that is because of the Soma cord, which is hiding here. You can see Octavia's head poking out. It's pretty shallow here too. There is a red zone beneath the floor. You can't go really deep. I highly recommend using flat things. So build your floor first. Get that established. The red zones are sort of forgiving for the rest of the room up until you get to the Lotus helmet. The Lotus helmet is over here. It's behind this portrait. And that is the reason why I have this really big sort of blocky wall here. From about here going back, that red zone is non-negotiable. You can kind of build above it a little bit. Honestly, just kind of build within your parameters. You will also need to create your own ceiling, and that's just depending on whether or not you want to hide this monstrosity here that is this thing that you can see right above the shower. I did have to use a large Zariman wall panel. This room does let you scale this panel pretty large in here without causing any issues with red zones. So it's very forgiving. It's cheap. It covers a great deal of width for the room. Now, I'm not going to get into details of specifically how I did each wall because we will be here forever. But what I will say is building around the oblong shape that is this room is going to help you. The moment you start defining your own shapes, the easier it's going to be to work within that. One thing I wanted to make you aware of is this bed. Now, there is a really bad red zone here, and the culprit is this kneeling console, unfortunately. And that would also explain why the bed doesn't really have anything on it. Trust me, I tried to add things to the bed. Quite literally cannot do it anywhere. It's very frustrating. Now, if you are going to build a bed here, it will also help to set it down low. That's primarily the reason why I was able to build one here. As you can see, I'm moving it downward and there's no issues with red zoning. It's only up until I get about here that I don't really have the freedom to position anymore. I did go ahead and flip these storage crate lids so that you can see what's behind here. It's basically the window, so that's how that's set up. $19.99 planter for this counter. Another $19.99 planter shoved in. This is the gilded illumination decoration that you get from the artisan pack set. This is the Galaxware Cowlin bowl that comes with Zaku's Deluxe. And this is a Daru planter. I believe this is a plat item. Zariman flush mount light for the mirror. This is scaled all the way up. And a Tondo display. For the bathroom, I've mostly used the Zariman large storage crate lids. For the surfaces, I've created a framing with two Zariman hallway dividers, one turned this side and one flipped and turned like that and clipped upward. For the shower, once again, I'm using those DeVere repass tables. And remember, we want it to be low enough that we can't see this protrusion at the bottom. So lower it just enough that you can't see it. Same thing on this side, I just mirrored it, duplicated it, and placed it that way. Two arcade ticket machines for the floor, an Orican cask from Leon for the drain, the Entrati conglomerator for this sort of detail here on the back of the shower, and I rotated it 90 degrees so I can get it to sit upright like this, and I just pushed it back. This is a gilded alchemy stand, again from Leon. For the back, this is another Zariman storage crate lid. For the shower head, I'm using the $19.99 lamp, just tilted a few degrees. In my case, it's 45 degrees, and I just stuck it like right here. For this transparent glass effect in the shower, I'm using a note beacon, and it is hiding inside of this storage crate lid here. The code you want to use is mod set filled notch. Remember, dark color for the light, low intensity so you can't see the beam. The length is depending on your positioning, but just remember to rotate it sideways because the mod set filled notch is horizontal. So if you want it to be long ways, you're going to have to turn it on its side. And the colors that I'm using for this glass, Conquest E18 and Agony B2. For the rising steam effect in the shower, I'm gonna have to peel everything away like it's wrapping paper so we can get a better look because it's under here. Let me see. There we go. This is the Saganwell decoration that you get from Acrithis. I actually placed this down first before I put my plinth for the floor. Remember, I raised my floor, so there's actually a lot more room under here than you think. The toilet. This is the DeVere clerical desk. This was scaled to the smallest size and flipped upside down for the toilet seat. For the toilet backing, the tank, and the lid, I am using the Entrati Stratolizer. For the flusher, I'm using a gilded alchemy stand. You will need to do a little bit of constrained movement to kind of get it positioned this way. Now let's talk the sink. Really, it's just two arcade ticket machines facing this way. I wanted it to kind of look like this drawer, and I didn't have any additional planters at the time. So I placed 2 like that, and then I clipped the table in. I then took 2 arcade ticket machines. I scaled them down to a certain size, and I duplicated one and placed it on the other side so I can have 2 counter spaces. And then I just have one part here to create the backing for the sink. Another gilded alchemy stand clipped in because it sticks out too far, so I had to back it up so that it's not completely in the way. And this is just a Deviri flask. I just placed it on the side. This is an Orican cask for the soap tray. A Zariman nutrition cube. For the towel ring and towel, I am also using an Orican cask from Leon. You'll need to place it up against the wall, and what I do is I back it in just enough so that only one of the rings is showing. Then I take a carbohydrate cube and I place it like that, and then use constrained movement to back the cube up. This wall art is just the 1999 planter. This art is what is this called? A new phase, and these are the filter settings. Now for this thicker wall here, I'm using something different, of course. So this is the Zariman locker low long. I placed 2 side by side facing this way. Then I went on this side and took 2 of the same locker facing this way. And then I took 2 Laverian murals and I placed them side by side to sort of hide the unsightly notches that are at the bottom of this locker. So that gold there is just to kind of clean up the edges. The kitchen is arcade ticket machine hell. I am using one here. Here. I've essentially stacked them and created a sort of, once again, a Lego block combination of items. I used smaller arcade ticket machines clipped into the wall so I could create a sort of border around it. This one was done the same way, but I did make it larger so that this could be the top part of the stove. There is no oven because this is a stovetop only. This is a ship, you guys. I'm not putting an oven in here. The white texture you see here is the Zariman table. So I've used one here and one here so that it has like this white marbly texture. I'm using the Deviri thermos for handles. I did need to do constrained placement to get those in, so I grid snapped them first, and then I used constrained placement to bring it back. A poster with the same smoke finger art was used for this sort of light. Although I'm not very proud of this light, it is what it is. This is a sideboard I use for the cabinet. So as I was building this, I created a separate notch. These are actually not dining tables, but these are the bottoms of the 2-seater couches from Velimir. I use them because it has not only a wood surface on the outside, but it has that dark surface that I felt served pretty nicely on the inside of this shelf here. And I'm using another one of those Zariman cabinets for the back. I'm using dining tables for the shelves. And the Dax portrait I angled and I sort of sunk it in and placed, you know, more items. I wanted it to be sort of leaning or angled a little bit rather than straight. This case here is one of the musical cases from Flair. It is taller, but I clipped it down further so that only these 3 drawers were showing. This is the desk that I made. I'm using an overlap of 2 arcade ticket machines. For the keyboard, I'm using 2 scrubber trophies. You need to Purchase the scrubber trophy blueprint from the business and craft 2 of them. Tilt them 45 degrees so that the scrubber is straight relative to the desk surface. Then you can move it down and then use your constrained movement to set the positioning of how you want your keyboard to look. I'm using a Tenet for my monitor. The Fusion display here for Sirius and Orion is taller than the monitor. I needed to sink the poster down into the desk, and the only way to hide it was to have the display flat on the surface. For the desk mat, I'm using these Rel emotion cards. You get these from Palladino and Iron Wake, the same place you get all of your, Riven stuff. For the mouse, I'm using the Orican cell decoration. You will need to angle it a little bit. I rotated it just enough so that those 2 little nubby things weren't showing. So I just kind of rotated it a little bit more. That is how I did my mouse. Just some small decorations here. Definitely ask me about any of the ones you have questions about. And I just used that to fill in the space on the wall. This part is also a little tricky. This doorway here has a little bit of a red zone, but essentially you are going to need 3 2-seated couches from 1999. So I placed 2 on either side. Once again, using the framing as a guideline, using these lines as a guideline. And I placed another sofa or 2-seated couch up here, just enough until only the wood is showing. And then I took the 2 large Zariman storage crate lids to cover the excess, to cover all the ugly bits. And just another one of those lids here, another lid here. Murals, just a little bit to trim. I didn't have enough to trim everything, nor did I have the capacity, but that's okay. I did use wooden panels along the way just because it was going to be a little bit complicated to do more gold. And that is the personal quarters. Now we make our way over to the transference chamber. I did film a majority of the process for this chamber. I will post a time lapse for this as well. It is 1 hour and 12 minutes long. If any of you here are insane enough to sit and watch through that time lapse, I will be sure to upload it for you guys. So I'm gonna start in the order of which I built it. You'll need a lot of Zariman wall panels. I'd say get 20 for good measure. And I basically used grid snap to kind of place these panels side by side, so I stacked them. These 4 pillars help me determine the entire structure of this mask. Once again, as I explained, a mask is basically a disguise for the room you're in. I essentially used Zariman Hall panels all around, so they are faced or turned horizontally, and then when I was done with this side, I would flip it this way and do that side, just making sure they're lined up. And when you have grid snapping on, it makes that process very easy. I did another layer of dividers above just to give it a little bit more depth. Laverian murals for gold trim and trotty wall sconces for the thinner trim. And you can also use grid snap with the Entrati sconces to create whatever design. I used it to kind of create this space design here. For the frame of this window, the arcade ticket machines were basically like Lego blocks in this situation. Just use your grid snap and line them up next to each other. Your grid snap will help you, and then the constraint placement is there to help with any cleanups. I'm using the Daviri repass table for the window framing. This gold backing here is the plinth. Just placed it back there like that. This blue design, also the same design here, is the corpus image. These are my settings. I did that same reflection technique that I did in the bar area. The door, by the way, is a mattress. It doesn't have any collision, so you can walk right through it. And then I just, you know, added some trim, door handles, Zariman hallway dividers for the pillars, dining tables for the wood. Now we're going to talk about the beacons. So the beacon is somewhere here. I actually have no idea where it is. Okay, guys, this is actually me recording this a few days ahead because I did manage to find where the beacon was hiding here. It's here. It's here. There it is. Okay. Remember to use a dark color for your light beam because we don't want the beam showing. Intensity 0. We are using Omega this time because Omegas are not transparent. So that's for solid color. You can either have a solid color if you make these two swatches the same, or a gradient if you have two different colors. The length in this scenario, because the beacon is facing in this direction, is going to control how far up or back it is. In this case, I had it at this point. For the color swatches, we're using Smoke A18, that's pure black. And for the secondary color, I'm using Beer A14. I'm using the Zariman statue plinths for the floor, the same thing I use for the floor of the bar. For this wall art, basically two 1999 dining tables mushed together to make a square, a small planter, 1999, the square one. I clipped it inside of the display, and I used the display squared for the art. And these are the settings. The Entrati wall sconces to create a square border. For this little planter bed, I'm using the grav lifter decorations you get from Borrow, or you can use something else. You don't have to use these rocks if you don't want to. You could also use the stone planter. But the stone planter is like circular. If you wanted a square planter, you might need to kind of work your way around those corners so that it looks and fits neatly inside. Lunar pictures were used for the plants, once again to complement the blue all around the room. For the TV, I am using Entrati wall sconces and posters. This is the image I chose, and these are the settings. For the soundboard, I'm using the two-seater couch. Now, I have this at an angle. I don't remember what the angle was, but I basically just angled it down and shoved it as close into the wall as I could. And then I used my constrained placement to back it up just enough so that a portion, only a portion, of the seat is sticking out. So I did that. I lined it with a wall sconce, and then this is just a Luxem ornament from Borrow. Turned it sideways, pushed it in so, you know, it looks like a power button or some sort of receiver. These are drawers, planters for drawers, sconces for handles. There is a note beacon back here. I have no idea where it starts. Okay, so I finally found out where the note beacon for the light was hiding. So it's right here. I'm very strategic about hiding them so that they're not like in the way. So it's here, but I can still access it if I need to change the colors. So, you know, have a nice cool like LED or RGB thing going on in the back, whatever you want. You know, you can throw a glyph on there, whatever you want. No, make it look like got something on TV. Also, this carpet looking thing here, just a bunch of planners I use with grit snap. And here I use 0.10, but I also used a little bit of constrained movement to kind of push it in. I'm using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 1999 wooden planters sunken into the floor, and another one of them for my coffee table. So that's how I did that. For this pathway here, these are all Zariman storage crate lids, the large ones. 1, 2, 3, 4. I use grid snap to align them neatly. Remember, these lids have prongs, so I turned them this way, like so that the prongs are facing inward and they are hiding behind the wall. I just used arcade ticket machines to kind of outline the entrance to this sort of hall of slates. I used a Zarman wall panel here for the base. I used the panoramic displays. This is the same corpus setting that I used for those posters out there. I just lined them up. I used the sconces to create a nice little grid. The note beacon is hiding in here. I could change the colors if I wanted. And for the mastery slates, I just kind of did 3 at a time for each section. And the designs, or the little diamonds that you see here, are supposed to represent the pending slates. And it just has a cool effect so that it's not this awkward empty gap. It has something to indicate that slates are pending. So a very minor detail, but something I wanted to add. All right, you guys, that is it. Oh my God, finally. Well, guys, finally this walkthrough is done. If you have any questions, definitely reach out. I quite literally have no life outside of work, so please reach out. I will respond to your comments as soon as I can. I will also drop our Architects Anonymous Discord server link in the description. It is a great place for dojo decorators, base decorators to meet, even people who don't decorate at all that just want a sense of community. You are welcome to join. You're welcome to ask any questions. If you're struggling on a project, we can help you out. Obviously not ABC 1, 2, 3, hold your hand, but we're there to support if you are stuck. We have a really helpful community. I also will be uploading a time lapse of this build here, this transference chamber, in its first final stage. My build has changed slightly since then, so it'll be a little bit different, but it's mainly just about the entire fundamental with some slight tweaks. It is an hour and 11 minutes long if you are interested in watching it, so keep your eyes peeled for that. I'll upload that since it's already edited and ready to go. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next video, whenever that may be. Bye.